Hey, everybody. Welcome to Teaching the Arts, my podcast. I'm Peter Hawley. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for giving us a little time. My guest today is Brian Cagle. Brian's a filmmaker, teacher of what started the film program at Northwestern University, Qatar, one of a group of people who started the program there. He's from the South originally. We talk about a whole bunch of stuff, travel, skateboarding, his show Mind on Heaven, and a couple of films he's made. Stay tuned for that in just a minute. I have been thinking a lot about Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis, the actor and sometimes butt of a joke. But I think about Jerry Lewis in one very specific way. First off, I actually like some of his films. Bellboy, I think, is a really good film. But in 1996, the very second class I taught, I had a group of students, 3 guys, who wanted to make a film, and they pitched the idea that they were going to shoot Jerry Lewis. They were going to have a hitman kill Jerry Lewis. And it just so happened that Jerry Lewis was in town performing Damn Yankees. And when they pitched the idea to the class, they said, great, go ahead and do it, but Jerry Lewis better be in the film. And they said, oh, you're kidding. I said, no, I'm not kidding. Isn't it a better film if you actually shoot Jerry Lewis? And we all laughed. And I said, well, I'll start working on the problem. And they did, and the next day they came back and they said, well, we know where his theater is, and we know what times his show is, so we know when he's coming and going from the theater. And another student found out he was staying at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. And they said, okay, well, we know these things, so let's at least try to get him messages. We sent messages to the theater, we sent messages to the Drake Hotel, and of course, Jerry Lewis did not respond at all. And about a week later, Columbia, where I was teaching at the time, Columbia College, Chicago, announced that Jerry Lewis was going to come to campus and talk. And you had to get tickets, student had to get tickets, and there were all of these draconian rules about you can't take a camera, you can't film him, you can't do anything. And I said, to hell with that. I mean, you got to go sneak those cameras in there, and I'll take the hit if you get caught. And they said, no. And I said, yeah, come on. What else are you going to do? So these 3 guys got there really, really early. And they hid Bolex cameras under their coats, even though it was the middle of the summer. And Jerry Lewis came out on stage. And Jerry Lewis was wearing white tennis shorts and a blue V-neck sweater. And he had his big glasses on. And I think he had a sailor's cap on, like a Greek fisherman's sailor's cap. And they surreptitiously shot him in this interview situation. And they were able to, they knew how he had to get off stage, so they ran backstage and filmed him coming off stage. So they actually had some footage of Jerry Lewis. So cut to, how are you going to use this? They didn't shoot him in the film, but they shoot him getting shot in the film. But they figured out how to do it. So they had Jerry Lewis, a guy dressed like Jerry Lewis in a blue V-neck sweater with a little stomach padding and white shorts, and they had him stepping off a boat in the Chicago Yacht Club, and they filmed him in the reflective glasses of someone's sunglasses. And they shot him, and they filmed Jerry Lewis being shot in reflective sunglasses. And sure enough, cutting that together with the footage they stole from his screening, they got Jerry Lewis shot in their film. And it was terrific. And I tell this story, and the reason I'm thinking of Jerry Lewis is really about collaboration, because there is no way this couldn't have happened if, A, we had students willing to help everyone else out. Students were giving up other people's film for them. They were sort of clearing the way and holding seats at Jerry Lewis's speech. They were trying to find where he was staying, and they finally finished this film. So cut to, this was 1996 when it happened. So in 2007, I was writing a blog about filmmaking and about teaching, and I told this story in that blog, and I got an email one day from a Jerry Lewis collector. And Jerry Lewis, this is a guy who collects all things Jerry Lewis, and he wanted a copy of that film. And I contacted the students, who I still remain in touch with, and sure enough, they had a copy of the film, they made a copy of it, and they sent it to this Jerry Lewis collector in New Jersey. So to me, that is the power of film and college filmmaking and collaboration. So my guest today, Brian Cagle, like I said, we get into it. We talk about travel, a surprisingly large talk about travel and skateboarding, and this theme of he needed more pavement. But it really, we follow sort of an experimental journey which took him from Tennessee to New York City to Chicago and Czechoslovakia and Qatar. And so here now is my conversation with Brian Cagle. So Brian Cagle, how are you?
Hey, good.
Good. So I got to apologize first off. As you saw when you walked in, I was eating an eggplant Parmesan sandwich. We're kind of in a tight space, so if you have a little garlic, forgive me.
You made me hungry, but I'll maintain.
Did you skateboard here?
Not today, no.
We will talk about skateboarding.
A little hungry.
Yeah,
a little hungry, a little cold, and yeah.
I got half a sandwich in there if you want. So let's talk. I mean, I know you as a colleague for 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I know you as a filmmaker. I mean, having seen music videos you've done and seen you, the Thompson piece, which we'll talk about as well. But I don't know how you got there. I mean, all I know is one day I got a resume in the mail and said, "Hey, I hear you may be looking for a teacher or something like that." And
right.
But how'd you get to that point? What's your background? Where are you from?
Okay. So the story starts in East Tennessee. I'm from Chattanooga originally, and when I was in Chattanooga as a kid, my parents were always pushing me to get involved in arts rather than this or that or the other thing. And so I think maybe early on I thought, oh, okay, this is something that, I'd like to continue to work on, to do, see what happens with this as also as a teacher, because by the time you get into high school, you start sort of,
You were thinking teaching
mentoring.
that early?
Yeah, I was thinking I wanted to work in theater originally, and yet I was constantly sort of bringing people up, and I think part of that's from Boy Scouts, which is also my background. That idea of tutoring someone, showing them the ropes, bringing them aboard.
Wow.
And I always got really into that aspect of it. That didn't dawn on me later on until I was teaching as my job, to see how these sort of steps have been laid.
Interesting. So wait, what did your parents do?
My dad was he worked in insurance business, and my mom was an administrative assistant.
So not an art background,
not at all.
No, and you wanted to do theater first, right?
Yeah, I had So, the idea was that they were both from small towns in Tennessee, and they wanted to leave. and so they moved to what they thought was the big city, which was Chattanooga, which is still small by comparison, but they got, an hour and a half away from their hometown in the hills of East Tennessee, because they're just second generation, out of the mountains,
wow.
in a certain respect. But
did they go to college?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
they went to college, and so they had. So my dad was in the war, was in Vietnam, and I think traveling during that time really opened his eyes. And so when I was young, he was like, "Whatever you do, traveling is very important. It's going to teach you a lot about yourself and a lot about other people." And so there was a civic group called the Chattanooga Boys Choir, and at the time, I liked to sing. So as my parents said, "Oh, okay, we're going to put you in here because they travel a lot."
Huh.
And so routinely from age, 10 until 14, weekends and sometimes during the weekdays, I was traveling, doing shows all around the Southeast, and then the summertime we would travel to Australia or Alaska or wherever to sing.
Was it part of your school, or was it a community thing?
Just civic organizations still there, still running. But at that time, it was kind of a larger operation. But still, we got to travel all over the U.S. And so by the time I was 14 or 15, I'd been in 46 contiguous states,
Wow.
Plus Hawaii and Alaska. So yeah.
Huh. So how do you make the transition? You were in the boys' choir, and then what about acting? What about other stuff? Great for your parents to push that,
right?
I
don't know. Yeah, I think that when you were, I don't know, maybe interested in art or just a little strange, you find yourself in high school or middle school or high school in the South, sometimes you start kind of looking to other people who are doing something different,
Sure.
And I think that for me, that was, okay, what's what's not, you know, this
sports
thing, what's my other alternatives, you know? And that became like, skateboarding. And I think skateboarding really opened up to like people outside of my high school, and then reaching out to people like all over town and finding other friends. And almost, they were almost all doing some sort of artistic or music or other thing.
I don't think of skateboarding punk rockers as doing something else. I guess, punk rock, but I mean,
Yeah.
So were you like at the skate park, the cement?
No, we didn't have that
stuff.
stuff. Yeah, actually, where I was from, we had like about maybe a 60-yard paved piece of road, and so me and my other skateboard friend would like meet up there, and just work really, really hard, to where we could like get by if we went downtown, as we said, to go downtown to skate.
And the municipal where it's all cementy and you can jump steps.
Yeah, because we had like gravel roads where I was at, and I think that was one of the things that actually later on made me realize something. When you have that kind of that little bit of that struggle to get some pavement, to get something that you think is really easy for everybody else to get, just the ability to put a jump ramp down or find a curb, or whatever, I feel like we worked extra hard, and
you were creating your own skate, park or skate community as well, as opposed to, here in Chicago, there's skate parks all over the place. Sure. Or you could go to Daly Plaza and, be illegal.
Yeah.
But here you had to work at it.
Oh yeah. At the time it was really, you would get like, I got accosted at school for being a skater,
Really?
you could like, I had like beer bottles thrown at me on the streets and stuff, it was weird that there was an animosity, but in a way that kind of makes you
dig in harder.
Dig in harder.
Absolutely. Sure. So brothers or sisters?
Yeah. I have a younger sister, and she was always much more artistically inclined than me in terms of drawing and being very great visual artist. And then went to science,
Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, those are pretty decent drawers who went into science also,
She's great at these very realistic, she could, especially like from photos and whatnot. She was always really, impressive to me, and it made me realize I had no skill as a
I
as a draftsman.
I can't draw a stick figure.
Right. And then when I had these friends who were all kind of musicians, and I didn't really play music, and they were artists, and I really draw, that I picked up the camera, and that was one thing I was always really fascinated by.
What kind of camera was it? Like DSLR, or was it film camera?
It's just the little point and shoot cameras at first, and then I got an SLR back then.
You had to put film in it.
Yeah, I put film in it and all that stuff, and it took a really long time to take a good photo.
Did you have to develop as well, or?
I did in college when I took a class, but normally, I just dropped it off at
the drugstore or wherever you did that. Boy, that's so old-fashioned sounding, You took your film to go someplace to get it processed, as opposed to it's on your phone, it's on your computer, you're going to Photoshop it, too. So you're doing the choir, you're a skateboarding guy. What else is it? You're probably, 14, 15 years old. How do you start making that shift into thinking you could have a career doing this thing?
Gosh, I don't know. I still don't know. No, actually, no. But I think that for me, it was seeing that there was this other side of life, that was creating. There was people involved in creating something that wasn't there before, and to get people together. And I think so. Community theater sort of fell in between skating and choir and all that stuff, and getting into community theater that led to like youth theater. And
were you Mickey Rooney? And I mean, come on over to my barn and we're going to build this thing. Though there is something really great about that.
Oh,
About creating something from nothing. You have just an idea, even if you've got a script. You still have to pull all the pieces together, and then it takes a life. It's suddenly you do a read through or something the first time, and it becomes a thing.
Well, I was really obsessed with like Saturday Night Live. As a kid, that was the end all be all, and like it's funny. I was reading some like yearbook stuff the other day, going through some old stuff, and people were like, "Good luck on Saturday Night Live."
What era? What was the cast?
This was the Phil Hartman, Dana Carvey, Mike Myers, that was crew, Jen Hooks, but but so yeah, we would like do summer camp for either Boy Scouts or the Boys Choir, and at those camps, I was always like running the talent show,
Sure.
and we would just reenact sketches we'd seen on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. I did the same thing too. I mean, cheeseburger. I mean, I'm that much older than you.
Right.
You're playing the piano a little bit on the table here.
Yes.
So just fine. But the nice rubbing of the cloth.
Yeah,
is
I hear it now. Okay.
That's fine. Yeah, but that's what we do. So. I think that those are really good experiences, the camp, and also getting out of Chattanooga. And that's not a knock on Chattanooga,
no.
just travel in general and meeting other people. And I'm sure you saw just different kinds of people, like from different parts of the country. How they lived were different, and so I'm sure sometime you went to a big city. You made it all the way down to Atlanta, probably at some point.
Well, Atlanta was the cultural capital. That's where you would always. And once we got driver's license, this is where you went for music, for movies, for plays, whatever. But I mean, in the before that, it was like there was a sense that always these kind of collaborations that I was seeing with people, that I was really keyed into, whether it was like getting this talent show together or building a ramp, but for more creative stuff, I think it was really eye-opening for me, like to both be doing this as a sort of, we'd sing for our supper when we're on tour with the choir, and then weuld go stay with a family. A lot of times we wouldn't even stay with
at a hotel
hotels or whatever, and you find out how different people live.
Sure.
And
any good memories from that? Like any place you went? You said Australia, but any place you went? Oh my God, this is so far from home, or it's so different. I mean, it could be different. Like I can't believe people live like this,
right.
Or different. I can't believe people live like this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had some great trips for that period, though, going up to Canada and finding out that it seemed very much like suburban America, except that people talk kind of funny,
And the dollar's a little different.
Yeah. But the biggest eye-opener was probably, like I had just gotten into the sort of the local youth theater group, and we had like a hit show.
What was it?
It was called Bamboozled. It was like for children's theater, and it was basically a commedia dell'arte, like parody, but for kids, and it was really fun. And anyway, the director of the show, the youth group, had an opportunity to take a delegation to Russia, and this is like right when the wall has come down, and it was going to be like this international children's theater festival. So we were doing that, as like a teenager, and going to Russia in like
That's amazing.
1990.
Wow, yeah, right after, yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
And that was just like really wild. Yeah, that was a total eye-opener and real adventure. And you're there with this group of other teens too, which was also made it interesting as a team thing, but so yeah, it was Dad was right. Travel definitely opened up, some different ideas, but also like having such intense experiences with like these other, friends of mine, and traveling. It was like, I don't know, it made me really think, oh, this is what I want to do. Whatever it is, find a group that is engaged, can collaborate. And so, first really that was theater, and that's what I originally went to school for. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like your parents were really encouraging or supportive, if nothing else.
Supportive.
Which is great. Because, I mean, they must have said at some point, there's not a lot of money in community theater, Brian.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, over Christmas, my dad said this to me.
This past Christmas?
Yeah,
as an
it's a little
adult?
late. Yeah.
What did he say?
He's like, yeah, I don't know if maybe we should have pushed the art thing as much, because I don't know if that should be someone's career, And I'm like,
should.
I think about these things too, but I'm glad you did.
So what, you got to college at some point.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school, undergraduate?
I went to University of Tennessee at Chattanooga.
So you stayed home-ish.
Yes.
Where were you studying? What was your major?
Theater and then English literature. I was a double major.
Both things that, you're setting yourself up to be a teacher, actually, in some ways.
Yeah. At the time, I mean, it was like, for me, writing was going to be how I'm, moved into theater, writing and acting, and yet as well, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't until later, but I mean, theater was really, again, a powerful engagement of like, how do you get people on this project together in a way that's everybody's putting their best foot forward to make something bigger than the sum of its parts.
That's one of the things I talk about a lot just to students is the opportunity to do something that's bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
You have to work with other people. You have to have a group of people together. You just can't do it, bigger. You may get lucky one time and do something great on your own, but you need to collaborate.
Yeah.
So what kind of, you've mentioned groups and organizations, the choir, the community theater, other places like that. Were there any individuals that influenced you? Were there any films or TV shows? You mentioned Saturday Night Live. What were your influences beyond these other people?
Well, I guess I was, it was, the VHS era, and I was really obsessed with my local video store. I remember in 7th grade, they were like, hey, everybody write down your top 3 films, and it was like, people are writing, like Star Wars and, nothing wrong with that, but it was weird because I was like the only guy that had like 2 Oliver Stone movies and a Brian De Palma film in 7th grade. I was like The Untouchables, Platoon.
Wow.
And I think Wall Street was.
I love Wall Street, man. Wow.
But yeah.
How'd you get turned on to those?
I don't know. The video store, again, was.
Quentin Tarantino? Wasn't he from Tennessee?
Yeah, well, I think he's from Knoxville, actually.
Knoxville, yeah.
Huh.
So okay, so you're seeing these things. And what about theater? Because I know, I remember going in your office and you had posters for, Chinese films that maybe you and I are the only people that I know who've seen them, Right. But how'd you start expanding that sort of, someone's got to turn you on to that. There was not the internet. You weren't surfing the internet then for some of those things, maybe a little bit, but who turned you on to stuff?
Friends for the most part. There were teachers who were very, influential for me, but whether it's a choir director or in theater, in the high school, the director of the theater company. But I think, I don't know, it was really just a buddy of mine that I skated with, and he was also obsessed with movies, and I found that he could tell you which blockbuster in the metro area had Eraserhead, and which ones didn't because it had already been stolen.
Yeah.
And so, talking to him about stuff and he definitely turned me on to more out there stuff, guitar and whatnot. But yeah, it was just like a friend who's a skateboarder, but also who's really now I see as like a true just VCR cinephile.
What's he do? What's he do now?
I'm not sure. I haven't talked to John in years.
I think that everyone has that guy who or woman who turns you on to something, who opens your eyes to something that you kind of liked but didn't know about. Sometimes it's teachers. Yeah. Hopefully it is teachers, but often it's you don't listen to teachers, but you listen to your friend, right? And you get turned on to these things. And I wish you could capture that in a bottle. And it's partly being open to other people. If you had only said, no, I only want to see Star Wars because I've heard about it,
right.
But you've got to be open to these other kinds of things. So when you were in college, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, but I think, there's part of that being, when you're from a small town, I think you're always sort of, at least I was always like wondering what I was missing out on because I wasn't in these bigger cities, which I'd seen as a kid, and thinking like, wow, these, other kids I'm meeting, they seem like much more cosmopolitan than me, and I don't know, in a way, I felt like he was trying to catch up, without being like a snob or whatever. I felt like, you've got to skate more, you've got to watch more movies. And I guess part of that idea is that you always feel like maybe you are, getting shortchanged on something because you're from a small town. And then I think later on, though, that was part of the thing. It's almost like having that little strip of paved road, it makes you work harder.
Sure.
And the idea that
this is a good theme for you. This little strip of paved road makes you work harder. I'm serious. It's those kinds of things are inform where people come from. You had to work to skateboard.
Yeah.
Where here no one has to work to go skateboard.
Right. You just walk outside your door, and that would be like, wow, it'd been amazing to me. And like at the time, of course, that's I was like, I just wish my parents would move to a suburb or something. But no, But yeah, that really made it, I think, work much more harder for that. And so like finding movies or the things that you felt like you should know about, So it was like talking to people about this movie or that movie was kind of like a way of, okay, I'm catching up, know? And then weirdly enough, I would find like by the time I got to film school, like much later, I watched way more movies
than anyone
just
else.
about anyone else.
That's
because
shame on them.
Well,
But good for you.
It's weird. Yeah, I think that maybe because it was harder. I'm not really sure why, but
Yeah.
they're always like, "Oh my God, you've seen all this stuff. Why?" But I think that's part of the like we were talking about a friend of mine over Christmas break how when I was in Chattanooga and I talked to old friends there and like liner notes in CDs, and how you would find out about other bands because we didn't have the internet, like you had to find out like what was cool, but you would certainly find out about artists and other bands and other stuff. And even movies from liner notes, the bands put in.
I think that kind of stuff, the investigation, figuring this out, or like reading the credits, like, hey, this cinematographer, I've seen that guy's name before. Who is he? And like follow that guy's thread and all that kind of stuff. I think, we have just enough of an age gap between us where I was watching all of my films on film. I saw film prints. I had to go, and the actual act of going out to a theater, and often was, I went to a bunch of universities where there were really good film programs. So for $1 on Tuesday night, you could go to the law school and they had a film screening series. I must have seen 15, 20 Hitchcock films on film. Rear Window and things like that. And you had the same thing with VHS and later DVD, where like going to the video store, Blockbuster or wherever it was a thing. Like it was like going to the library, like looking into these things, and especially if it was curated well. Maybe that's even the key word, curation. Where someone curates like these ideas for you, these skateboard videos or skateboarding or this thing, and turns you on to it, as opposed to it's just all out there and you've got to figure it out.
That Tarantino thing, like he was a video store clerk, but I remember you would have like a kind of a relationship, or certain video store clerks knew what you liked, and they would want to tell you when you came in, like, hey, we got this, you should check it out.
Same with record stores. Well, now Netflix has an algorithm that can tell us what we like, But record stores, there was the guy behind the counter that would go, hey, that B-52s record you really like, here, listen to this other thing, you're going to kind of like it as well. And it's like you need to experience that stuff. So let's talk about college a little bit. So you were a theater and English dual major.
Yes, yeah.
And you acted then. Did you do shows, or were you on the behind the scenes stuff?
I worked in the scene shop as like my student aid, like my financial aid. But yeah, I got to do acting a lot.
Like what kind of shows were you in?
Well, a lot of times I guess I can be a little funny, so I would be cast in comedies a lot, not as many drama. But
like comedies like we've heard. I mean,
okay. Well, let's see. I was looking at photos the other day of we did Lillian Hellman, Another Part of the Forest.
Sure.
She was married to Dashiell Hammett.
Yeah.
And
Lily and Dash is a film. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And I at the time I'm like, I knew a little bit about his work, and I thought, oh, this is great. I want to do this, but I played the messed up son, who's just like a ridiculous, parody of himself. So I would get in these roles that were sort of exaggerated, and I really liked that, but really enjoyed also just the technical stuff, the work, of like hanging lights, running shows as well.
You like process then. Like, the bringing together, the building something from scratch. You talked about building a ramp, maybe even for skateboarding. What did you think was going to happen graduating from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, with a theater dual degree with that in English?
No. There is one diversion here, like the fact that because the school, it was so small that we got a lot of attention, right? So you got this small theater department, and whereas I would have probably not been able to act unless I was a grad student in a lot of other like larger programs. I was consistently, cast in shows, and there was a lot of attention because it was a small, department. And then they developed this one-on-one exchange program with Maastricht University in Brno, Czech Republic. And it was like, go over there to this place where theaters played a revolutionary role, you know, and it's like 5 years after the Velvet Revolution, like 95. I go over there and I spend a year there. And I'm seeing theater 3 nights a week and movies the other 4 nights a week.
In Czech?
Yeah. Well, the plays were mostly in Czech. I found that you didn't really need too much of the language.
Wow.
Unless it was audience participation play, which is terrifying.
I went to a Korean wedding once.
Yeah.
And I was like one of the only non-Koreans in the room. And it was like, there was almost like a game show atmosphere. I had no idea what was going on, but someone like could translate for me just enough. It was crazy, but like that, it was audience participation.
Right.
Like I didn't know we're supposed to do this. You know, I'm like at a wedding reception.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what? So you were there for a year.
Oh yeah.
Studied a year abroad.
Right. And you were just supposed to kind of see if you can get in. Here's the school, but really what you do with, working with, the actors school or whatever is really up to you. I decided that I wanted to write about this, the director, Eva Tosca, who was working with children's theater, but it was very avant-garde kind of children's theater. Which
because
I thought
kids
was
appreciate that so much.
Yeah, right. But it was strange, and she was like one of the the main directors of this theater there. Husana Pravazku was like Goose on a String, and it was where they really started the Velvet Revolution. When they started strikes, the theater shut down and just left the doors open to have public forums, meetings.
Wow.
And this is really where the strikes all began. And then so when the wall fell and everything changed, they took the head of the theater and made him the minister of culture. But so she was one of these directors that had been working there during this time. And I was really wanting to find out more about her, and she did not want me coming to rehearsals. But I would talk to actors and beg through a translator, and finally she would kind of let me sit in the corner of the room as long as I didn't make a peep. And maybe 3 or 4 or 5 weeks later, finally sits down to have an interview with me and stuff. And so that was, now beginning to look a little bit deeper into both process. And I think I was doing something that was more like a bigger project than I could have done even as an undergrad. But it keyed me into like dramaturgy and thinking about, how do you develop the context for a show? How do you put together a show from disparate elements? Is it just a director working with a writer? And in theater, there's this thing called a dramaturg, and it's not that common in the U.S., honestly. But the dramaturg might be the person who sticks everything that might be relative to the show up on the wall, and we start picking out, well, how are these things going to come together, And there was something like almost production design like that, that I was really interested in. So I came back from this experience like, I'm going to be a dramaturg. This is it. And yeah, so I mean, I graduated thinking,
where are the dramaturg jobs? Both of them in this country.
Right. It's like, well, you need to go to grad school first. I was like, I don't know about that. So I got a job as an intern for ontological hysteric theater in New York City. And so I moved to New York after that to work for Richard Foreman, who was one of these directors that I'd kind of looked at as someone who was a legend, and got to put on this play of his in like 98, 99, and thought that was it, man. I'm in New York now. This is it, and I found quickly that I'm one among 12 interns. Maybe one of us gets a job, and so yeah, I was really beginning to now think, okay, how do I figure out a career that how to make a living in the hardest place to make a living in the world?
Sure.
So I had gotten a job at the MoMA, working at the MoMA, and just like what I did with all my spare time, Chattanooga, wherever else, I was just watching their movies in their screening rooms there all the time, after work, sneak in on my lunch break with a sandwich, met Stan Brakhage, met people like, that I'd, looked up to because they're just doing private screenings there that I could get tickets to because I issued the tickets. And, but yeah, I was just watching movies all the time. And then I began to dawn on me like, well, there's this New York theater that I would really, really like to invest more, more time, more effort into. At the same time, it's like you are putting up the show that is going to be for one zip code. and really one particular zip code that doesn't travel elsewhere. Right. Some shows do travel, but the idea was, I was thinking, well, how do you do something that can reach more people and can find its audience wherever it goes? I thought, it's like music or anything else I was into, like trying to find the people as weird as you who are into these similar things. And theater becomes prohibitively, expensive to poured around, and I started thinking about film, in a way that I had always just looked at, it's like a viewer, a lover of film. But then, well, why do you obsess over this stuff? Why do you know so much about this stuff? I think part of me was beginning to really translate the directing and writing I was doing in theater into film. But yeah, so I was living in New York, and actually I decided to do a documentary back in Chattanooga. And
what was it on?
it was on the sit-ins of demonstrations. So,
What were they protesting?
Well, they were protesting lunch counters, segregated lunch counters.
Historic. Oh,
yeah, historic sit-ins. Oh,
I certainly hope they weren't segregated lunch counters in 2000 in Chattanooga.
Right? Yeah, this is like
wow.
I guess
So
2000.
why this idea? Because that means you have to use historic footage.
Yeah,
or recreation, I guess. But
well, I was very, very like pro my city, having, almost like, again, like almost a chip on your shoulder about coming from Chattanooga, and being really proud of where I was from. And I was, living in Harlem, and I actually found a book of Martin Luther King's speeches. And I was, reading these books of speeches, and one of the speeches was about this pivotal demonstration in Chattanooga that I'd never heard of before. And I'm like, I should know about this. And like, I asked a couple of other friends, and they didn't know about it either. And they began to ask around, and they started saying, well, maybe you should talk to this person. And I'm now calling people back home, asking them if they had heard about this thing. Like, oh yeah, I think I heard about that. But basically there was so yeah, I was in Harlem, so I went to the Schomburg Center for African American culture, history and culture, and looked up all these old magazines and whatnot about the demonstration. And I was like, wow, this was significant, and we don't really know about it. No one knows about it, yeah. So I'm going to make a documentary. So
did you know anything about making a documentary at that point?
Nothing. I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll find a camera. We'll figure it out.
Good. Come over to my barn, and we're going to do a documentary on the civil rights demonstrations in Chattanooga.
Right, yeah.
So what? So you made the film?
Well, now, a couple years later, yeah.
So okay, you've done this.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get seen?
Yeah. Actually, we. I went home and tried to raise money. No one wanted to give me money because I hadn't made a film before. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I had some other friends who were doing these workshops. Those artist friends I knew back then, they were working with kids at these rec centers and doing these after-school programs. And I was like, well, great. I can do theater games because I was teaching kids that in New York City as well. But what if we got a video camera and made it into a movie making class? Mm-hmm. And so we got a grant, and we created a movie with these kids in an after school program where they like kept dream journals and would also just make up stuff that they said were their dreams. And then we would basically animate them using like, almost silent era techniques of stuff. And it was a hit. The mayor came to see it. Wow. Mayor was Bob Corker at the time, now our senator or whatever, And it was cool, and I thought, okay, well, great. Now, hopefully I can do more of this, and maybe now people let me make this documentary. And it did. I gradually was just working in schools there, doing workshops for kids. And I found that, like, if I came in and said, we're doing theater improv exercises, everybody was like, eh. But if I said, okay, we're doing improv exercises so we can make a movie,
everyone's excited.
Oh, wow. So
you're Mike Nichols all of a sudden, as opposed to Brian Cagle, theater exercise guy.
Right. So at that moment, anyway, it was a much bigger deal that you could bring a video camera in the classroom and make a movie. And so I'm just teaching myself this stuff like a week out, trying to figure out how to edit what I'm shooting with the students. But by the time I was figuring all this stuff out, I finally had a documentary I could make. And so we made this documentary with I made it for the Chattanooga Regional History Museum. So it had a big, screening there at this history museum screening. And I think, but I'd done it with their money, and in a way I didn't really consider it was mine, So I didn't submit it to festivals. I thought that was something they were supposed to do, So at any rate, it won a few awards from like Tennessee Historical Foundation, but that was about it,
Nice.
But yeah, it was based on the documentary that got me to, apply for grad school.
You both knew at the same time, you knew so little, and knew so much. You learned about these demonstrations and all that kind of stuff, but you knew so little about filmmaking. You learned so little about distribution. About ownership, copyright, all of that kind of stuff, and you just sort of put it all together. That's interesting. Actually, it's a great way to learn. And you probably made some mistakes along the way because you didn't know.
Nothing but, yeah. But I think there was that DIY thing, and whether it's skating or music or art or whatever, like, the people I like doing their own thing, not figuring, you don't know how to play, we'll figure it out on the way. And I try to approach that with video camera, and I still, miss that, like not knowing what you're doing and yet just in a full experimental mode, trial and error, it's a very free like feeling that I think it's hard to get back to once you are learned.
Yeah.
Once you're
it is right. It is. Once you know the rules, it's really hard to break them all the time. Right. So, okay, you started applying to grad school.
Yeah. So, decided, okay, if I want to do this and make a career out of it, I got to get out of Chattanooga again. And so after leaving once and coming back, now I was like, okay, now I got to really get out. And started applying to grad schools. And after I made the documentary, I got some
acceptances.
Yeah, some acceptances.
Where were you looking?
UC. What's the one in
Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, San Diego?
No, the
Davis.
where Tim Burton, those guys. Gosh, is it UC?
You didn't go there.
No,
it's Cal Arts.
Cal Arts. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I applied to Cal Arts because they actually had like a theater film combination. I thought it'd be a pretty good fit for that. And applied to Temple as well, and Northwestern University, because especially for these three schools, I wanted to go there because they were still shooting and teaching 16 millimeter film, and that was like the big thing for me, in like 2003. That's really was getting harder to come by. So it was really important for me to be able to shoot on film, and I think again there was like this sense that I was gravitating towards cameras then that I didn't even realize.
Do you think now, though, if you had to do it 15 years later, shooting on a film, is it such a big deal? Or what do you think about film versus HD?
I look forward to shooting on film again. I'd really love to shoot on film again. It just really changes the dynamic. I think having this mini DV camera, the Sony VX1000. It's like a famous camera, I wish I still had it. But, you had this thing that was indestructible. We dropped it, we hung it out of windows of cars. But, we could just keep rolling and keep shooting until we got it right.
You don't understand an economy of skill.
Right.
And the other thing that I like about film is, as everyone can see right now, I'm holding my fingers about 16 millimeters apart. You have an appreciation of 24 frames in a second, as opposed to click, right arrow, left arrow, and it's a frame. And you have 40 frames in a foot of film, and that if you make a 3-edit cut where you cut 3 frames out of a scene and taped it back together and put it back, how much it changes. Digitally, you lose all that. So between that, the relationship to the frame itself, and digital editing, I just miss that in film. But otherwise, to me, it's like there's so much, the quality is so much better than it first started. The sensors are so great now and stuff like that. So you went to Northwestern, got an MFA.
Yeah. So, Northwestern offered not just film production, but the opportunity to teach. And there was a little bit of a sort of a indie experimental vibe to it.
Who were some of your teachers there?
Documentary.
Chuck Lionis, is he Chuck there?
Yeah, I had Chuck Kleinhans for this experimental film history class, which was one of the best classes I've ever taken, because he would show all these films on film, and it was probably a very costly class to produce, but he did it once a year or every other year. You had to get in on it, and I just it was great. Loved his class, and he Jump Cut was a journal as well that he'd been running forever, and that I was later on he put an article that I'd written in there about Iranian cinema that I'd run across in Qatar. But yeah, so yeah, Northwestern.
We're gonna
was,
get to Qatar in a minute.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, Northwestern had this, the opportunity to shoot on film. They still had some really decent film cameras and the opportunity to teach. And I get there and find that I could really start asking to TA any class I really wanted to figure out how to do that thing.
Wow. So who were some of the teachers there that influenced you, and then also as a TA for them, who you saw teaching chops? They influenced you both as a filmmaker and then as a teacher.
Well, definitely Chuck, Chuck Kleinhans, Scott Curtis was also he did film history, and I'm a huge
Documentary
film history buff guy. So having his classes.
Doesn't Scott do the Qatar program?
Yeah. So he sort of followed me after I left Qatar, and it was funny, He kind of said, "So what's this about?" And I kind of gave him the lowdown, and he's still there.
What else in terms of teachers? I mean,
Dave Tolchinsky, who's still there. Deb Tolchinsky as well.
He's the head of the program.
Yeah. And his partner Deb Tolchinsky, who was really head of the experimental classes at the time, which I was really interested in, as well as my chair for my thesis was Michelle Citron. I known about her work and could read her writings and whatnot. It was great. So it was a really good crew, very supportive, and it was a small operation there. So you felt like if you needed something, you got it.
So you got an MFA. Right. And then what were you thought? I mean, you're sort of starting the cycle all over again. You've taught a few classes. What did you teach while you were a grad student?
Oh my gosh.
Intro production classes?
Yeah.
Or, theory? Or...
Every intro production class. Didn't do the theory because that was really reserved for the PhD students, if it was a paper writing class. But that, anything where you picked up a camera or audio or... I don't think I did the compositing class, but I certainly took the compositing class. I was just, trying to squeeze everything in, taking too many classes, all production.
So what did you want to do? Oh, so now you get the MFA. Then what did you think you were going to do?
Well, yeah, now I'm going to go downtown and start working in...
and people are going to pour money your direction.
Commercial production, I was like, I'm going to work in commercial production and get some, get a script and produce it. And then as I'm leaving and walking out the door, they offered me a teaching position. So
nice,
great.
Yeah. So a full-time a faculty position?
I had a
lecturer. Or
actually was a visiting assistant professor.
Nice.
For the first year I was there. But yeah,
visiting from down the street, right?
Down the street from last year's class. Yes.
Nice.
So yeah, I was in partly because I had been doing production classes as a TA, and I could do some of those now as a lecturer, as an instructor, and so yeah.
Nice. So we'll get to Qatar in just a sec, but what as a teacher, how'd you find the students? I mean, the Northwestern students in Evanston, I'm sure, are different than the Northwestern students in the Middle East, and I'm sure they are different from the Tribeca students you had downtown, and certainly different from the community groups you worked with in New York and Chattanooga. So what were the students like when you first started teaching? What were their expectations and stuff like that?
I mean, the students were, it's Northwestern, so the students are already, kind of exceptional, in terms of, to get in there, got to test well, and I felt, for the most part, students really could handle anything threw at them, and were, but also more keyed into maybe, where this goes after I leave here, which is something I could have used probably a little bit more as well, But yeah, there was well,
they're spending so much money to go to college there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're dropping $200,000. I mean, yeah, it's discounted and something like that.
Yeah,
but over
most
4
people are
years,
getting
still they're $100,000.
Yeah.
So they have to be thinking what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
I mean, you went to UT Chattanooga, which was a state school,
right?
And you were a state resident, so you were
and
not
my mom worked there, so
you were not paying much.
Got a deal,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. And you still said you had to have a student aid job,
right? Yeah.
But so I think that they go into a school like that. Students go into a school with somewhat of a mindset of, what am I going to do getting out of here? I mean, I bet there are very few people who aspire to be a dramaturge.
Right. Yeah. And at the same time, I I don't know. It was interesting because you know, I mean, I knew students there who were very, very serious about their craft and just took their, you know, their work in cinematography from there right into AFI. You know, I knew several students from the program that ended up at AFI. But there was, I don't know, there's, you know, probably there was somewhat of a disconnect in the sense that like if people weren't already kind of keyed into production, you know, if that's something they weren't already looking at, I think it was sort of hard to pull them over to see that the production and the aesthetics are hand in hand, you know, that they are not like one or the other.
I'm rolling my eyes because I'm saying, how could they not understand that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, aesthetics, I mean, you know, did you ever teach an aesthetics class?
Yeah. Well, you know, so your paper writing classes,
Yeah.
you know, I had a few screening classes where, you know, you really
Screen
kind of
and
breaking
discuss.
down, creating a context for the discussion and the, you know, some argument in the class of what you're after. And those classes were you know, were great. And I feel also that those classes were the ones that these students were best sort of, they're ready for that, you know?
Yeah.
Coming in and
they still probably haven't seen enough films, you know, at that point. I mean, it's shocking how many film students don't just eat up film left and right. I mean, they should be seeing film all the time.
Yeah. And it was weird to me to see that as well. Like I was known as this guy who'd watched too many movies, you know, like, do you have a social life? You know, you just sit at home in the dark. But I mean, yeah, the people I knew who are often still doing it, you know, were people that, you know, went home and watched 2 movies a night, you know, they were constantly doing that. And
you have to have that language. You have to understand the language of cinema. So sorry to jump ahead here. How'd you get to Qatar? What happened? Tell me that story.
So I'd been an adjunct at Northwestern for 2 years, and they were opening this school, this campus, Northwestern University in Qatar, the next year, and they were, you know, trying to see if we can get some people from the radio, TV, film department to go over there and help start this program. And it was crickets. You know? I mean, I remember the dean would come in and talk to everyone in a full faculty meeting and waiting for hands to go up, and there's nothing, you know. So, I was thinking, well, I'm not sure how long I can continue as this adjunct here, and that sounds really fascinating to me to be able to go and start a school and or help get this happening. And so, you know, after the meeting, at one point, I went to the one faculty member, Dr. Mimi White, you know, who's gonna lead the team over there, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I'm an option, but I would go. And she's like, really great, let's do it, you know. And then it was like, we're off and running, you know.
Well, so. I mean, I'm making notes, and this, you know, you have a theme of travel and experimenting, and not only experimental film, but experimenting. I mean, Czechoslovakia, going to Russia with your choir or theater group, taking a risk, which is an experiment. You know, you had no idea what was going to happen when you went to Czechoslovakia, and you had no idea what was going to happen when you went to Qatar, because, you know, this is also how close to the start of the last Iraq War, or maybe the current Iraq War, where we are. I mean, right around the same time, right? I mean, love started a few years earlier, but you're in that region, and you were a relatively fair-skinned guy, and, you know, you're going over there. So what did you think you were getting into?
I knew that we were going to build a school there, and that there were already 6 other American universities set up on this kind of I joked that it was like a food court of like American universities there, and this is called Education City in Doha, Qatar. And so Northwestern was going to be like the next, if not the last, school to come into this this food court and set up shop. And so they were everybody brought like one program basically, and they wanted to bring journalism and communication from Northwestern. And so we had a group from Medill, and then this contingency, this cohort from communication, which included radio, TV, film, and comm studies and all this other stuff. But like, they really wanted to have this, the film media production component there, because I also think students were really, really looking for that as well, But yeah, so it was going to be like this, we were going to be like the media school, and I think I thought, well, this is an opportunity for me to hopefully have an adventure, but also, test some things out that, I've held that, if I could do this,
If I could start a school
if
in
I
the
could
Middle
start a
East.
school, if we could start over with like production
Uh-huh.
of like, what kind of gear would you buy,
Yeah.
And things like that.
And you were in on
And
those decisions too?
yeah, so
Wow.
I get to get in on how we built the gear array, and that was a big eye opener. But it was also like we knew that probably 75% of our students were women, and they were at the same time
75% of the Qatar students were going to be women.
overall.
Wow.
Yeah, I think in our school, I mean, in our program, it might have been more like 65.
Well, still,
but still,
I mean,
yes,
if you look at film
majority,
programs here, yeah,
right?
wow.
Yeah, not the dude fest that it often is here. Yeah, but there's So, and we knew that culturally, a lot of these young women did not drive, right? They had drivers, right? They'd take them door to door, and they could drive, but but it was like we had to get stuff that was mobile, and stuff that they could frankly carry, and so it was like getting stuff that was modular, stuff that we could roll, lighter weight cameras, and
that works. I mean, that's the trend in how film programs are going anyway at that time.
Yeah. But at that time, it was kind of like, okay, there's another chance to do some things a little bit differently. Because the gear array at Northwestern, I mean, it's actually really nice in the sense that we've got like a lot of stuff that you're going to find on any film set. And there we wanted to have, instead of just, dolly track, we want to have mobile, pliable dolly track that you could, roll up and put into a trunk and things like that.
So how much prep time once you get to country, in country, going back to Vietnam, of your dad in Vietnam, once you get in country, how much time did you have before those first classes? I mean, did you have months or a year? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I knew I was going over like 8 months ahead, and they actually flew me in for some of the student interviews in February.
Wow.
Before we started classes, that September, that fall, and so myself and my soon-to-be wife went over there and got to see what was happening at this quickly burgeoning like megalopolis that is Doha. I mean, it's crazy. It's like that you turn around and they've built another skyscraper. The thing is just exploding with growth. But yeah, I think I wasn't even sure yet. I've already signed up for this, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, if things don't go well, maybe there's an out. But when we get over there and I start interviewing the students, then I was sold.
Oh, great!
It was like
so no doubts after that moment. I mean, some of course, but
sure,
I mean,
yeah. But I remember one student. We got to do these interviews, and one of the common questions is like, why? So why do you want to come here? Why us? Why not one of the other schools? And one of our students said, well, Sheikha Moza has opened this door for us, and she met the women, the young women here in Doha. Sheikha Moza is it's a monarchy, and and so she's the queen basically of Doha, and she's also the one that spearheaded this whole education city and set up these schools here, and ostensibly to make sure that young women got to have educational opportunities that they may not get because the tradition, the culture, very, very just brilliant women were not leaving home to go to London to study, So like, well, then we'll bring it here,
Great.
And then what can the argument be? Well, we still had arguments about like what films we could screen and things like that, but that was part of the adventure.
I'm thrilled. I mean, and you were young. You were 30. How old were you?
Something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, what a great opportunity at a time.
Yeah.
So how long were you there total?
2 years.
Good experience all the way. I mean, no regrets. You didn't go, I lost those 2 years of my life, and I could have made a feature.
It was. Well, yeah, it was an amazing opportunity, and you're like in the middle of the world in a way that you're not here in the sense that 6 hours in any direction you can be speaking radically different languages and different cultures. So it's a great place to travel. But I think the students there, it was different than what I think that that while just really really motivated, in Evanston, the students I found in Qatar were. they they need to get this stuff now because literally they might think, well, we don't know who's going to be in charge in 5 years.
Yeah.
We need this education.
In charge of the country.
Yeah. And we want to make sure that it's not going to limit, what women can do in 5 years. And that hasn't happened, but there was a sense that, okay.
Time's fleeting.
Yes,
here.
yes. No time to waste. Let's get to work.
That's exciting.
And yeah. And so there was a nice...
It makes them motivated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I bet
was
attendance was pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Nobody... Very, very few actually absences.
So I remember when you went back for the first
graduation.
graduation. So that must have been really rewarding just to see it come through. Was that the first graduation?
Yeah, that was the first graduation in I guess 2012, and
God, is that long ago?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Where is time gone?
But yeah, the students that I had really, I could say, without a doubt, like it's just me and these 3 other instructors that, had this impact on you. And, it's like not to take credit for what you're doing, but
I'm taking credit for
it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that means you had the same students several times, probably.
Right.
And you got to know them and you got to do. So are any of those students doing anything now? I mean, they've been out in the world for 5-6 years. So
yeah, I mean, well, that's been one of the really gratifying things. I mean, there's some students who have got films on Al Jazeera, films that have gone to the Cannes Student Film Festival, documentaries about Palestinian hip hop groups that have really just gone all around the world at this point, from film festival to film festival, and having known like these students, these last 4 years is what made this possible, and I think that you could really take that as, like, solely to both your credit and much to my my pleasure at seeing them. Just take advantage of this.
That's
and
great.
Largely, they have. And most everybody's working in media, but at the same time, not everybody like went into like a strict film. I think there was also that sense, and we were talking about this earlier, like whether you're going to work in media content generally or specifically film production. And those students that were really serious at Northwestern, Evanston,
One film.
Yeah, and
they don't want to be content creators.
Right.
YouTube stars.
Yeah. It's not so much, and it's not necessarily the content creation with the Qatar students, but that they really, they were ready to build this media landscape from the ground up as well, all around them, like work at Al Jazeera, but work at this TV station that hasn't even existed yet, so. Yeah.
Huh. So let's change gears and as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
So after Qatar, that's where we hooked up.
Yes.
And I will tell you the thing that popped off the resume to me was you had this production experience, editing and all that kind of stuff. The MFA, I'm always a big fan of hiring teachers with MFAs. But of course, being part of that group that started at Qatar was, so you were joining our school, which was a startup basically, which at that point was 2-3 years old, 3 years old maybe. And then I was like, okay, this guy at least knows what it's like to have a shifting landscape.
Yeah. I remember that. You said, what it's like to work at a startup.
Yeah.
And I thought and that's one thing that, when coming back, I missed that experience,
So since then, I want to talk about the Thompson film.
Oh, yeah.
And so tell us about it.
Okay, so...
the Thompson Center film, I should say.
Yeah. There's a documentary I shot for director Nate Eddy. It's called Starship Chicago.
You were the DP?
Yes. And a couple of former students also worked on it.
Good.
But the documentary is about the Thompson Center downtown, which is, where Clark and Lake stop. It's the only place where all the trains come together, but it's this spaceship-looking building.
Helmut Jan.
Helmut Jan is the architect, and really someone who's like this legendary architect in the city. And
it's an infamous building if you live in Chicago.
Oh my gosh.
People either... Helmut Jan, for those of you who don't know, also did the Marina Towers, right?
Oh, no.
That's I blew that one.
But we did... Well, actually, I met him because I worked on a documentary with him previously when they were tearing down Goldberg's Prentice Women's Hospital.
Oh, right.
And so...
that funky building.
Yeah, which also looked crazy looking building. And so I'd heard that they were going to tear... Well, now, Browner was talking about selling the Thompson Center 3 years ago. And I immediately called the director up, and I knew it was like his favorite building in the city, and said, okay, I think they're wanting to tear down your building. And so we immediately, he said, okay, we're shooting this summer. So we got together and and interviewed just these luminaries in both Chicago architecture as well as architectural critics in the city about the debate. And it really is a debate because as you said, it's an infamous building. People that work there often hate it, and yet it wasn't built to specs as originally in design. But the goal is, well, if the goal is to fix it up to where what it should have been, is the government really going to be, the state government really the one best to do this? But if we sell it to somebody, are they going to tear it down? So at any rate, we made this documentary about the Thompson Center, which I feel like when you walk in there, it feels like Blade Runner. I tell people it feels like Blade Runner since it feels like an 80s version of the future.
It does, right. Yeah.
And I love it for that. And yet, I'd always wanted to have a good excuse to go in there and just shoot for everything, But yeah, so we made this film. It took about a year to wrap editing and all the final interviews up and everything. We got to interview Big Jim Thompson, former governor who's named after and whatnot, and get all these different opinions. And released it online and immediately started getting picked up by, various, Chicago Tribune wrote about it. LA Times, Architectural Digest actually did something online. And
can people see it?
Yeah, it's on Vimeo, Starship Chicago. It's available there, and there's we'll be doing another screening in the city in a couple of weeks, although I don't have the information on where that's at yet.
Well,
but
let me know and I'll post it.
Yeah.
So the other thing that we got to talk about is Mind on Heaven.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so tell us what that is.
So I thought I'd put theater in the background of my life, but yeah, one of my great friends and close collaborators worked on my first film. Ben Williams is an actor I've known forever. He's also from UTC, from Chattanooga, and he lives in New York and works with a company there called Elevator Repair Service, and he's been with them for like 10 years, and they do all this crazy stuff like 8-hour, word for word Great Gatsby.
Sure, I remember when that was.
And so anyway, he's been working doing the experimental theater that I had tried to talk him out of many years ago. And anyway, we had a close friend of ours that was very influential from Chattanooga who died.
Who?
Dennis Palmer. And Dennis Palmer was this he was a musician, artist, kind of a polymath though, because he was really good at bird calls and really we loved talking philosophy and whatnot. But he was someone who with along with this other recording partner, Bob Stagner, they created the Shake and Real Levi Society, which is a nonprofit there that brought, again, strange art, music stuff when I was there. And when I moved back there, I was briefly I was on the board of directors. I was working to help bring in music that wouldn't otherwise come in. We brought in the Tibetan monks to do one of the sand paintings and everything. But anyway, Dennis had died. He'd known he had a heart attack, and he knew he wasn't long on this earth, but it all kind of took us by surprise. He was only, 50, not quite 56.
Hey.
And so at any rate, we did we got together to do kind of a tribute of things that we thought he think were really funny on stuff that he had turned us on to, strange ephemera of, Southern, TV and whatnot. And we did this thing at his memorial. He flew in, I flew in, we do this thing real quick, and it just fell really flat. And we were like, well, this is really fun though.
No one likes it, but we do. Yeah.
But we really, what is a tribute? We try to figure out how to make a tribute to someone who, you really care about and you want people to know about. He's this incredible artist that you don't know about, but how do we tell you about that since you don't know about him? So you realize that then the tribute also always comes back around to you,
Mm-hmm.
And so we began to meet on a regular basis and develop this show called Mind on Heaven it begins really and ends really as a tribute to Dennis Palmer, but it goes a lot of places in between, and I think it kind of matches his sort of surreal energy as well, So we try to both invoke him without doing a more like a biographical piece. It's really also about growing up as an artist in the South, and where do you go with that? What do you do with that?
So it played in Chicago.
Yeah, we did a development show at the Grace Center at the University of Chicago in 2014, and then gradually we started picking up time to do it here and there, and we did a couple of workshop performances in New York, and that led to like a 3-week run at Access Theater this last September.
Yes, and really well reviewed. And where's the future of this show?
We're hoping that we go to Detroit in the coming year. We're talking to folks there about bringing the show there, as well as a couple other cities. We hope to tour it. You know, it'd be nice to be able to tour this in a way that we can go in and out for, you know, a week at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I never thought I was gonna
go back to theater,
be on stage.
Yeah, well, I'll post the New York Time Out article, and you can see you on stage. You know,
and it's like film and music, and you see us media, doing the stuff live, and that's kind of where I come in. Yeah.
What's really interesting here as we wrap up is you have a really interesting journey, and it starts with travel. It starts with experimenting with things. It continues with being curious. And like, look at all these things we've talked about. I mean, Qatar, this show, Mind on Heaven, it's all sort of comes back to Chattanooga in some weird way.
In a weird way. I cannot escape it.
And I hope you get back in the classroom.
I can't wait. Yeah. This is something where I feel that when, things are working in the classroom, you get that same energy of, whether it's, developing a show with someone or working on a film, you're in this group project, in a way that is really, really, enticing and revealing, both about yourself and about other people, how you work together. You think you work well, and yet you find out how you have to adjust what you do, so yeah.
Cool. Well, and you get course evaluations, and then they tell you, right. what he does and doesn't do well.
Yes,
all right, man.
In
this
all
was
caps.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is good for you.
Oh, it's great.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, that's it. Thank you, Brian Cagle. It's in the can. That's a wrap, as they say in the film business. And I really appreciate it. Really interesting and really neat how it all tied up. Travel. Don't underestimate travel, folks. Also, I want to thank you again for listening. And if you have a suggestion for someone you want to have on the show, or you want to be on the show, you can reach me at Twitter at TITA Podcast. That is Teaching in the Arts Podcast, TITA Podcast. That would be me. And I will try to listen to you and get back to you. For now, I'm out of here. I need to go get a drink.